Good day, everybody. It's Chris Gallagher right here at the Preacher's Pen for our Preacher's Pen weekly Bible study series class that we go through. We're going through John chapter 11 today, and we are on day number 3 of John chapter 11. I would ask as we go through this, you excuse me, we got some allergies that are working here because the state of Alabama and everything that's blooming just really, well, it doesn't like me. We don't get along too well with allergies, but that's all right. We're going to dig into our study, and we're going to see what we can grow and how we can grow by knowing more about John chapter 11. John chapter 11 is our study for this week. And it's a very interesting chapter because many people know John chapter 11 because of one verse. We'll get to that verse tomorrow. That verse is John chapter 11 and verse 35, where it says Jesus wept. The shortest verse in our English translations, not necessarily in the Greek, but in our English translations, and as a result of that, many people know it. When you ask somebody, what's your favorite Bible verse? They'll say, Jesus wept. Well, what about Jesus weeping do you really like? What's the story behind it? Most Christians know that it has to do with the death of Lazarus, and it has to do with Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead. And we often ask the question, why is Jesus weeping in this passage? But I think we have to understand the context behind this emotion. Just as if we see somebody crying, we know that something has happened in their life. When you see somebody weeping, something has happened in their life. In the life of Jesus, something has happened. But it's happened, as Jesus says, for the glory of God. We talked about this yesterday on Tuesday, day number 2, as we've gone through John chapter 11. So today we're going to continue a little bit more in John chapter 11, and we're going to pick up in verse 17. Now, tomorrow we're going to get into Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead and the fact that Jesus is going to cry. He's going to go through those emotions. And what does that mean to Christians today as we go through emotions? We're going to spend some time in talking about that. After we talk about Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead, we're going to end our week with the after effects of it. But as we get into this, let's look at John chapter 17. And this is what it says. John chapter 11 and verse 17. And this is what it says. Now when Jesus came, he found out that Lazarus had been in the tomb for 4 days. Now, if you remember, when Jesus found out about Lazarus, he continued to stay where he was. And what he told his disciples was this illness or this disease, illness is not to death, but instead it's for the glory of God. Now, that was a statement that Jesus really hasn't made before. He probably hasn't even hinted at that with the disciples, but here he is, and he makes that statement. The disciples really not knowing this, but they do know that he wants to go back to the area of Judea. This is the area where the Jews have tried to kill him. So the disciples decide that they're going to go back with him. And they do. And it says that when he had found out that Lazarus has already been in the tomb for 4 days, and we're going to come back to that at the resurrection of Lazarus. It says Bethany was near Jerusalem, about 2 miles off, and many of the Jews had come to Mary and Martha to console them concerning their brother. So you have a period of mourning. Lazarus has been in the tomb for 4 days. Lazarus is dead. He's not there anymore. Well, so they think. So many of the Jews have come out to console Martha and Mary. They've come out to give their condolences. They have come out to look to them and to try to give them a little bit of hope. And it says in verse 20, and I love this scene that takes place. It's a very sad scene, sorrowful scene, but it's a very compassionate scene. Verse 20 says, so when Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went and met him, but Mary remained seated in the house. So Martha comes first, directly to Jesus, and says in verse 21, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Now, let's step back from this scene for a moment, and let's ask this question. And the question is, how do you think that she said it? What kind of tone can we read? Now, we can read tone into the Bible, but look at the situation. She's just lost her brother. They've sent word to Jesus. Jesus delayed his journey. They have not heard that the sickness is not unto death. They have not heard that the glory of God is going to be made known. What they understand is that Jesus was not there and that Lazarus has died. That's what they know. So when Martha runs to Jesus, she says, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But notice the next verse, verse 22. But even now, I know that whatever you ask of God, God will give to you. Did Martha know something about what was coming? Did Martha know that Jesus would have the power to raise Lazarus from the dead? Did Jesus know that did Martha know that Jesus had this, I will say, planned? Did she know that? Because look at the next verse. In the next verse, it says, verse 23, your brother will rise again. Martha went to Jesus, said to him, if you were here, my brother would not have died. But Jesus says, your brother will rise again. But the key there is what Martha continues to say. Martha, in her statement, if you were here, my brother would not have died, she continues to say, but I know that whatever you ask God in his name, he will give you. Now, verse 23, Jesus says he'll rise again. Verse 24, Martha said to him, I know that he will rise again. So where is the mindset, right? I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day. Martha knew something. She knew about the resurrection. She wasn't thinking now, but she had to be thinking something. That's all I'm going to say for right now. It says, verse 25, Jesus says to her, I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall live. And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? The powerful statement of Jesus, as she says that I know that my brother is going to rise in the resurrection on the last day. Jesus says, but I am the resurrection and the life. Think about that. Think about the hope that Jesus now brings to her life, and in an eternal sense, not just in the physical sense for a moment, but in the eternal sense. I am the resurrection and I am the life. Now notice what he says. Whoever believes in me does not die, or though he die, yet shall live. And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die. So if someone's physically dead, they are going to live. And you're really not going to die, because we know that there's eternal life that has been given. Jesus talks further about this, I believe, with a connection to John chapter 14 and verse 6, where Jesus is getting ready to leave his disciples, his apostles, and he says, let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. For in my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, I would have told you, but I go to prepare for you a place. So he's telling the apostles, those closest to him, right there in that imagery, in that scene of John 14, that these individuals are going to have a place that he's going to go prepare them, and they know he's going to die. So the Christian continues to live on. The Christian, follower of Christ. As he says here, the believer. Now, if you believe Jesus, you're going to do everything that he asks. We understand that. But he's going to continue to live. But he asked Martha specifically, do you believe this? Now, I want you to notice what Martha says. This, to me, fascinating. She says, yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ. When Jesus says, I am the resurrection and life, talks to Mary a little bit more, Martha, and says, do you believe? She says, yes, Lord, I believe that you're the Christ, the Son of God, who's coming into the world. Martha knew something. And how did Martha know something? Well, I believe that it goes back to the relationship. Now, Mary and Martha had a very unique relationship with Jesus. They had a unique friendship because they could call upon Jesus. We see that here. Jesus was in their home. Jesus had a very frank discussion with Mary and Martha. So when we see this scene here, we have to understand that this scene is about relationship. It's not just about, okay, this happened, but it's about this happened for a reason, and here's why it happened. The glory of God is going to be shown through this. So as he has this discussion with Mary, he asks her a very simple question. Do you believe this? I think for us, as Christians, as we dive into this text and as we look through all of the teachings of Jesus, we have to ask ourselves the question, do we believe this? Do we believe what Jesus is saying? Do we believe what Jesus has said? Do we believe that Jesus is the resurrection and the life? And if so, do we believe him? Do we believe the words that Jesus speaks, and are we following those? It's a question I believe that you have to ask. But thank you for being with us today. Check us out online, preacherspen.org. You can find more about us on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/the @preacherspen, or rumble.com/preacherspen. Thank you for being with us. Come back tomorrow and we'll get into this passage a little bit more. As always, have a blessed day. We'll talk to you soon.